So we'll be finishing up this semester. We'll be talking about dimensions today. We'll be talking about dimensions and site dimensions today. And then Wednesday, we'll be talking about, let's see. We'll be talking about, I think we're going to jump right into XREFs on Wednesday. And what I've done kind of in the past is there is another category of lecture called Hatch that I want to go over, but I usually, and I've done this past couple semesters and I feel like it works pretty well, I assign a video for that. So we'll have a video for Hatch, and then we'll lecture on XREFs. So we have a couple classes to deal with XREFs, and then really just some drawing techniques. So creating exterior elevations. So I think we'll probably end up stop lecturing maybe on Monday. And then the 25th, we unfortunately skip the holiday, right? It's on a Tuesday. So you'll have the 25th in class, you'll have the 30th and August 1st to work in class on your final project. And then the last day of classes is August 4th, which is, let's see what day that is. Saturday. Yes, we have Saturday classes here. And then the final project will be due on August 6th, right? So, so we're getting there. We're getting there, just a few more weeks. So, okay. Any questions before we get going with dimensions? Any troubles? No? Good. Sky, sounds like you have one, but you stopped. Yeah? No? Okay. It may help somebody else. Okay. All right. If anything else comes up, we can go over it. Okay. All right. So let's talk about dimensions. So I'm going to open up this wonderful drawing we did last week, and I think we're just going to use this drawing to create dimensions here, all right? And let me just say, I think dimensions are not terrible, okay? But there are a lot of settings involved. And we are going to generate, let's see here, there we go. We are going to generate annotative dimensions, so just like our text was annotative, our dimensions are going to be annotative as well, okay? So, and again, I've said this before, this book it's somewhat outdated. There are pieces that are useful, right? I feel like the dimension portion of this is pretty useful, although we will be using the annotative dimensions, and it doesn't talk about that, but it does talk about all the different settings. And I think that's kind of the tricky part with dimensions. So let's zoom on down here and find dimensions. Okay. So what's great about the book, it does talk about how to create a new dimension style, and then all of the different settings, kind of graphically, aesthetically, line weights, all those different things. It does go through all of those, right? And so this will help you in creating your dimensions, although we will be creating annotative dimensions, and he doesn't create annotative dimensions here. So we'll talk about that little bit of a difference there. But again, if you get lost in your dimension style dialog box, you can look in the book and find the settings you need. All right. So let's talk about dimensions. And of course, well, hopefully, right, everybody knows what a dimension is. I'm hoping at this point, yes. Let's go down here to our assignment, and we'll just make sure, just in case, right? But here's a good example of dimensions, all right? And dimensions consist of a few different pieces. Let me zoom in here a little bit. So every dimension that we have consists of an extension line. So this is our extension line here. This is the line that it shows where your dimension starts or stops. Okay, so for example, this set of dimensions here starts at this point, and our extension line extends down to a certain point or a distance away from that where we're dimensioning there. You have a baseline here, or a dimension line, and this dimension line here is where the actual numeric dimension in text format sits on your dimension style. Okay, so we have our our extension lines, our baseline or dimension line, and then we have these little architectural ticks. And these little architectural ticks here, they show you visually where the dimension starts and stops, right? So for example, this 9'7.5", it starts here at this tick and it extends to that tick. It doesn't go from here, you know, all the way over to there, all right? So those are the three different pieces of dimensions, okay? I want to talk about a little bit of dimension, how we go about dimensioning things. So before we actually talk about how we generate them in AutoCAD, I just want to talk a little bit about means and methods for dimensions, okay? This is not the best example of dimensioning, and I think I'm going to try and find, we have another document here on our CAD Common. Arch, let's see, let's go to Kevin's. No. Let's see, 1310. There we go. Okay, so, and I actually, maybe I'll post this to our Canvas site, but here are some good dimensioning standards for actually, hey, when I'm dimensioning, what do I dimension to first? How do I go about dimensioning things, right? So this is a pretty good standard way of going about dimensioning. Although I have to say, with regards to dimensioning, wherever you're working, we do have this general standard, but everybody likes it different, right? So you may want to just know going in that there is a standard for dimensioning and what items you dimension first, second, and third, but just know also that everybody likes it just a tiny bit different, okay? So the first string of dimensions will always be to the center of all windows and door openings and to wall faces, right? And what I mean by that is, well, let me say this, to the center of all door and window openings, but some people like it to the rough opening, so sometimes it can be from one side to the other to show the actual width of the opening. But in general, the first string of dimensions, which will be this string of dimensions, it will show openings, all right? And it will also show things like interior partitions, okay? So here, no, this one is, sorry, this is a little different than what I was thinking too. Intersecting walls. Okay, so Kevin does it a tiny bit different. We'll go with his. This is okay too. So first string, openings. Second strings is a little variation from what I normally do. Second will be and what he means by intersecting walls is these partition walls from the interior striking the exterior wall, right? So we have openings, whether you like to do it center line or rough opening. We have partitions from the interior kind of hitting the exterior wall. And we also have changes in plane here, right? So you'll see that where this face of this building comes and it kind of, you know, jogs back a little bit. We're also going to see in that second string of dimensions where that jogs back a little bit, okay? And then our third string of dimensions will be the overall width of the house. So we've got from here all the way down to here. And I think he made a little mistake not including that right there. Okay, so first string, opening, second string, intersecting walls and changes in plane, and third string will be the overall dimension of the entire project, okay? Now, again, this is just a kind of rule of thumb, but everybody does it just a tiny bit different. Okay, so I want to talk about how we are going to create some dimension styles. Dimensions are actually pretty easy, right? Once you create a dimension style and you use them in your drawing, they're very easy to use, which is, right, a relief maybe, right? So let's talk about how to create a dimension style. We can compare a dimension style to a text style, right? So a dimension style, we're going to define all the aesthetics of our actual dimension lines, okay? So it will be aesthetically controlling the text that's used for the dimension numbers. We're going to be controlling the baseline, the dimension line, the extension lines, the ticks, and what layer it's going to be on. So we're going to control all the aesthetics and the scale. Yep. Yeah.
I know that we're opening this file from, right, is there any specific setting if I were to do a new drawing to be able to go, I guess,
Uh-huh.
when you open this, are all the settings already
Inherent in there?
Like, and then print from Paperspace?
So when we open up, like when I open up my drawing here, all of my dimension, like a brand new drawing, is that what you're saying? All of the dimension styles are blank. So there's not really one defined.
So the file you opened is already set to be able to print from Paperspace, correct?
Let's look. I don't know if I did that. I think I did. Yeah, I did. Uh-huh. Yeah. But that's something that I did, right? It's not inherent in the file. Is that what you're asking? Yeah. So when my workflow is when I start a brand new project, number one, if you have a template file, you can set it up so that it's always ready to print from Paperspace, right? But if I open up a brand new blank file and Paperspace isn't set up, I will open the file, I'll save it, make a few layers, do all the things I need to do, and then I'll immediately, before anything is likely even drawn, I'll come over here to my layout tab and click on it, and I will change the page size, put a viewport on it, right? So that when I have my drawing ready, I can center that drawing in Paperspace and then use that to print. Does that make sense? A little bit? Okay, good. It's like Paperspace is kind of a confusing topic, I feel like. It always was for me, at least, when I was starting to do this. Okay, so let's talk about creating some dimensions. If you come up here to the Annotate tab, you'll notice we have text right here on this tool palette, and we also have our dimension style right here. And pretty soon we'll talk about leaders. Leaders are over here on this tab. Okay, we have kind of a quick dimension right here. This is just a way to generate whatever dimension type is current. We've got our dimension style drop down right here, and this is a gallery showing. These are dimension styles built in, but they're essentially blank. There's no settings associated with them. Okay, we have some different type of dimensions we can choose: linear, aligned, angular, right? And then here we have our baseline, our continue and our baseline commands. So, and then one more area, we have our little flyout menu here, which is very similar to our text flyout. And if I click on that, it prompts me to create a brand new dimension style. So we're going to worry today about choosing a dimension style. We're going to worry about what type of dimension we're going to use. And then we're also going to talk about continuing and baselining our dimensions. Now, one thing I want to point out about dimensions before I go any further is that, let me click on standard here. I'm going to create a little dimension here. If you create a dimension, and a lot of you might do this by mistake, if you create a dimension and it's on this standard style, and that standard style is just a blank style in AutoCAD, your dimension is going to look like this. And you're going to say, hey, I have a dimension style, but the text is really tiny, and it was in decimal format, and my drawing isn't architectural, I don't know what's happening, all right? And this is happening because you chose the standard dimension style. And this standard dimension style has not been defined, right? So it's not going to view correctly in your model space, all right? So this is one kind of common thing that happens. I want to point out that when I'm dimensioning, I'm doing it in model space. So where I draw this drawing, right, I also add my dimensions in there. One other little thing I want to point out here is that you'll see that my extension line here that comes down to the endpoint of my wall there, okay, there's a tiny little gap here, which we can define whatever we want it to be. But there's also a little grip here, all right? And this little grip, if I pull it out into space and hit escape, you notice that little tiny dot that's happening, all right? That just really kind of, it's a grip, and it kind of allows you to guide your dimension to whatever element you want to dimension from, of course. But I wanted to point your attention to it because this is what the def points layer was generated for, all right? So if I go to home, and of course you're all pretty familiar with our def points layer now, if you haven't accidentally drawn on it, def points is just a special layer that I always say don't draw on, right? Well, but why? Why don't we draw on it? And that's because, well, number one, it doesn't print, and you can't change that. So if you draw anything on it, it won't print. But the other reasoning we don't, other reason we don't draw on def points is because it is specifically designed for this right there. That little dot at the end of an extension line there that rests on the geometry you're dimensioning to. So that is what is on the def points layer inherently. You have no control over it. You can't change it. You can't do anything to it. But that is what that little def points layer is for.
What if I don't see a def points layer? I don't see a def points.
Oh, you don't have one?
I don't really see mine either.
So,
When you had to set up our file,
uh-huh.
we downloaded, that wasn't in that file. So we have the 0 layer, but we don't have the
Def points has been deleted. Purged out maybe. Maybe it was purged out. Let's see if we can delete I don't think you can delete the def points layer. Yeah, no. I wonder if that specific file was just, maybe he purged it out for you. I never noticed that. So, wait, that was from a brand new file though, wasn't it?
Well, it's one we created.
Yeah, you created it. So you went File, New, or let's just open up a blank one. So if I click on Start Drawing, I wonder if it's being filtered out. Let's see. That's odd. Is that a new 2018 thing? Let's look. It's interesting. So it doesn't seem like it's not gone. I guess sometimes when things sort of go away, you know, let's say the community, right? The community lets us know. But that is kind of odd. Where is our def points layer? I don't know. I'll have to look around for it. I'm tending to think, well, I've got all layers on here. Maybe if we create a dimension, maybe it will pop up. Let's look. There it goes. So maybe because you hadn't created a dimension yet. Yeah. That is a new thing though, because usually it's just there by default. So that is kind of a new thing. I didn't realize that. All right, well good, so you don't need to touch it, right? It's not there. Okay, so but that's what that def points layer is. I always get that question, hey, why do we have this def points layer? Don't use it, you know, what is it for? And that's what it's for. It's specifically for this little guy right there, right? And it's non-printable, so you'll never see that little tiny point print. All right, so error number 1, if this is what, when you create dimensions, is if this is what it looks like, then you are using the standard style, right? And that's not defined. And so that's what you see, and it's not correct. So let's define another dimension style, all right? And I'm going to do that by clicking on this little flyout menu here. And I'm going to click on New. If I wanted to, I could have clicked on one of these, and I could have chosen New, and it would create a, you know, maybe a copy from one of these. In fact, I think if I do, sorry, maybe I misspoke. If I click New, I think it does ask me if I want to start with one of them. So I give my dimension style a name. So usually what I like to do when I'm naming my dimension styles, I like to name them according to the scale of the drawing they're associating with, right? It's haunting you all, right? The scale of your drawings. And I say that because, well, we'll get into it. We'll get into it. So I'm going to name this, I'm going to make this one actually pretty generic for now, but let's just call this new dimension style for now. I'll come back to what I was going to talk about. I do want this annotative. This is a departure from the book, okay? So the book has really great information on the settings, but again, when Jeff was teaching this, he didn't teach annotative formats. So we want to make sure this is annotative, and we want to make sure this is check marked, okay? And then I want to hit continue. And when I hit continue, what I just did there was create a brand new dimension style, all right? So any type of setting or property that I change in this dimension style dialog box will be applied to that one dimension style, okay? All right, so the good and bad thing about dimensions, the settings are not terrible, but there are a lot of them. But when you change them, they update over here in this dialog box. So you can see what you've done, and you can see if you've made a mistake, all right? So the first thing that we're going to deal with is the lines tab. And you'll see we have a few different tabs up here, okay? And the lines are going to be the extension lines, the dimension line, the baseline, and the color of the text will be dealt with later. So it's really just all of the different lines with regard to dimensions. So I think usually what I'll just do here is I'll choose by layer, okay? And what by layer does is it will allow the dimensions to take on the properties of the layer you place them on. So this allows some freedom in them. If you want to make them magenta, you put them on a magenta layer and they turn magenta. And they have a line weight associated with them that is magenta, right? If you want them red, then you put them on a red layer and they're red, okay? If I didn't choose by layer and I just chose red, regardless of what layer I put them on, they would always be red. So you're kind of overriding the layer settings by choosing a color instead of choosing by layer, all right? So you can choose whatever what you want to do, but I think by layer is just the easiest way of going about it. And I always choose by layer for most things in AutoCAD because we manipulate our layers so much, right? So we'll make layers for everything, we change the colors, we associate pen weights with them, and so we sort of maintain our drawing through our layers. So if we allow the geometry just to read the layers, then it simplifies it a little bit. So I'm going to choose by layer. Great. And our line type, I'm going to choose by layer. My line weight, by layer. Okay. Now my extension line, same thing. I want it to be by layer. And my line type, by layer. And my extension line, by layer. So all of these things are going to be by layer. Now you're going to see, let me click on this. You see what's happening? How that line is getting very, very long, right? So we can change the settings for some of these different things, the extension line, right? You'll choose what you want. I'll maybe leave it at 1/8, okay? I don't really want to change anything else in here.
Your line weight is by block.
By block?
Your line weight is by block.
Oh. Oh, whoops. We want that. Thank you. By layer. There you go. Thank you. That would have took me a minute to figure out. Okay. So they still don't look quite right, but we're getting there. So I'm going to go to symbols and arrows next. And I want my, my tick marks, instead of being this little arrow, I want them to be architectural ticks. So immediately the second tick changes to match. And our leader, which we're not going to worry about just yet, is still an arrow, okay? All right, so center marks, we're going to check none. And let me just, that was a center mark right there, right? So I'm going to just choose none on that for now. We're going to leave that alone. Let's see, arc length symbol, we're going to do none on that one as well. That one is a little bit harder to show, but it's very, very odd when it does pop up. So we're going to choose none. And that's good enough for this little tab. So architectural tick, close filled, none, none, and we're good there. Next tab is text, okay? So if you haven't figured it out already, right, a lot of things in here build from week to week. And text is going to be one of those things where your text styles will come back to haunt you if you've generated them in your template, great. If you haven't, you'll have to generate them now. But you're going to choose a text style for your text of your dimension. So if you use a drop down here, you see we only have annotative and standard. If you had a text style created in your drawing, you could use it. If you don't, AutoCAD says, hey, great, why don't you browse out to the text style editor and create one. So I'm going to click on new, and we'll call it dim style text and hit OK. And so I have dim style text. And we can, let's use the good old city blueprint. There we go. and regular font, okay, and we are going to leave our text, oh, I think we leave it not annotative. Sorry guys, I'm trying to, because the dimension style is going to control this. We might have to go back and change this, but I believe we leave it, no, yes, oh shoot. We'll figure it out real quick. I'm going to leave that blank. We'll leave that blank for now. And then we'll just kind of, you know, if you want it to be like 0.80 or whatever width factor, you can do that. So we might have to come back and check that. I can't quite remember right now. I'm going to click on apply, close. And now that dimension style that I just created, right? There we go. I can choose it and my text shows up here. Okay. So my text color, I want that to be by layer, again, so that my layers control, not my objects. The fill color, we'll choose none. The text height, so how tall do I want this text to print? Again, the eternal question, right? In model space, how big does that have to be in order for it to print a certain size, right? We talk about this a lot. And within the dimension style, we're just going to define what size we want this text to be when it prints on a printed page. Okay, so this is about 1/4. Let's do this like 1/8 of an inch. There we go. Oh, no, we don't want that. 1/8 of an inch. So that looks pretty good. So we've chosen our text style, what color the text will be. Don't worry about fill color. Text height. The vertical placement of the text. Do we want it centered or above? Well, we want it above, right? Horizontal, we want it centered. So centered horizontally between these two lines. And we want to view it left to right. Great. Okay, text alignment, I want it aligned with the dimension line. So now instead of kind of cutting it in half, right? So you view it vertically, it rotates so it's just above that dimension line. So things are moving along. We've got the lines, symbols, text. We're going to click on Fit Next. Don't worry, these will all be in the videos so you can pause and copy them, right? Let's see, so these are some fit options. So if the text won't fit between the dimension lines or the tick marks, what do? Let's see, if there isn't enough room to place both text and arrows inside the extension lines, the first thing to move outside will be, and let's see, we'll try to always keep it between the extension lines. Let's see, we want this one to be over dimension line with a leader. And this is going to be left annotative, okay? So when this is checked annotative, that means it will scale appropriately depending on the annotative scale of your drawing, right? And I'll show you that, what that means again. All right, let's go to primary units, and then we're gonna leave these two tabs alone. So you can see right now it's in a decimal format. That doesn't mean that your drawing is in a decimal format. We can see down here it's architectural, okay? The dimension style is just defined that way. So we're going to change this to architectural and things start looking better. Do we want to round off, or no, sorry, I skipped ahead. The precision of this. Well, it depends on what kind of task you're doing, right? So if somebody's doing millwork details, they probably want like a little bit higher precision for reveals and different things on their millwork than like if you're doing a floor plan, right? So this is really going to be dependent on what type of task you're dimensioning. So for now, we're doing a little office. So I think probably like maybe 1/4 of an inch. I should have probably chosen 1/8, but we'll just use 1/4 for now. Rounding will be good for us. We want the format of our fractions. Do we want them like that, or diagonal, or not stacked? So, you know, they run next to each other. I don't really care, whatever you'd like better. And rounding off. I think we could round off to our precision, which would be 1/4 of an inch. Okay. So everything else here looks good. All right. So I'll just go back over and we'll take a look at all of our different styles, right? Ooh, maybe our tick marks look a tiny bit big. Where are our tick marks? I just bumped it down a tiny. See how they can get tiny, tiny, or big, 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 right? So pretty good. Looks, nope, maybe a tiny, there we go. Text, fit, primary units, and we'll leave these two alone. All right, so this is a well-defined dimension style for an architectural application, right? Like dimensioning a floor plan. So I'm going to hit OK now. I'm going to click on it and set current, and I'm going to hit close. All right, so what I just did there, I just defined a dimension style, and it was just the aesthetics of it, right? So now I want to use that dimension style. How do I use it? All right. So I'm going to delete this little, no, I'm going to leave that there so we can look at it. We'll just keep a little eye on it. I want to use my dimension style. Okay, so there's a few different types of dimensions that we can use, all right? We have a linear dimension. I'm hoping a little video will pop up. Yep, there we go, okay? A linear dimension creates a straight dimension. So regardless of whether or not the object that you're dimensioning is angled, right? You see how on that example, it's sort of an angled dimension, right? It takes a straight dimension between those two, okay? An aligned dimension, it aligns to the orientation of whatever it's dimensioning, right? So instead of being straight, it angles. We have an angular dimension, which will create an angle between two, like in a triangle, an angular dimension. We can measure an arc. We can measure the radius of a circle, the diameter of a circle. We won't worry about these last two. So essentially your next task, you open your drawing, you create a dimension style, you choose the type of dimension you want to use, then you choose your dimension style and you dimension, right? So I think for now I'm going to choose an aligned dimension. I'm going to make sure my new dimension style is chosen, because if I don't have that chosen, we're going to get this error here. I'm going to mouse down to whatever I want to dimension. I'm going to click on it, click, move in the direction I want to go. Now notice I don't have to click up here. I just click on the object that I want to dimension, click, and then I drag my dimension out. Oh, I did need to make it annotative. My bad there. No, I didn't. Nope, I didn't. Okay, let me fix it. I'll show you how to fix it. Now, this is a really good example of an aligned dimension, right? So it aligned to essentially that angle, right? So I dimensioned from there to there. If I had chosen a linear dimension, right, from there to there, it would create a straight dimension, okay? One really nice thing about dimensions that once you learn stretch, you're always panicked about after the fact, is that if I want to change a dimension, I can click on it, I can grab any element of it, I can drag it over. Let me drag it over, and it maintains the integrity of the shape, right? So even though I'm kind of dragging it and it's not quite a straight drag, it doesn't stretch odd, right? It maintains its integrity. Now, the number on here, right? This number is not acting right. And it's not acting right because I have my annotation scale set to 1 to 1. Okay? So mistake number one that I see constantly, right, or consistently, is you forget to change your dimension style and use the standard style. And we get this, we get just an undefined dimension type, right? So there's a little, you can see that. Mistake number two, you actually define the style correctly and you use it correctly, but then you forget to change the annotation scale of your view, right? It's the same thing with text. When you change the annotation scale of your view, your text flexes to be bigger or smaller so that when it prints, it's the right size, right? So what I need to do now is I need to look at my model space, pick on that and see, oh, I've got it scaled at 1/4 inch is equal to a foot. And I'm going to change my annotation scale here to 1/4 inch is equal to a foot. And my text style jumps, right? And my text style jumps, right? Let me just look at this real quick. I'm going to do a little trick here. If I list this text style, that text is actually 6 inches high, right? even though in the dimension style, let's modify this real quick here. I wanted my text height to be 1/8 of an inch, right? This is the same idea behind text. AutoCAD scales the text up, so it's 6 inches tall, so that when it scales it by 1/4 of an inch is equal to a foot, it equals 1/8 of an inch. So a half of a foot, 6 inches, right, is equal to 1/8 of an inch when you scale something at 1/4 of an inch is equal to a foot. Does that somewhat make sense, right? Well, it makes sense like right now, right? And then you go home and you're like, wait a minute, what was the idea behind that? But the nice thing about this right now, again, with the annotative commands, is that you don't have to think about that, which we used to have to think about, and it was a big pain in the neck, okay? All you have to realize is that you define in what size you want that text to print at, and then you set your annotation scale, and AutoCAD takes care of the rest, okay? So now, when I look at my layout here, and it's off the page, so I'll have to fix it. But there are my dimensions, right? Wonderful, beautiful dimensions that we didn't have to measure or think about. Okay, let me create a few more dimensions. So I'm going to click on linear. Actually, my dimension of preference is aligned because I like to get the orientation of whatever I'm dimensioning. So I'm going to click to the middle of my opening, move my dimension style out, click again. If I want to create another dimension, I click on aligned, click here, click, come up. And if I want these two dimension styles to be aligned, right, in a nice, neat line, I'm just going to click on this dimension line of the adjacent dimension. Click, and they align, okay? If I change to linear, I can still continue to dimension. The aligned and linear, you don't really see a huge difference until you try and angle one or the other. Click, 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 click. I drag it up, I click, escape. Okay. They have a lot of integrity. Again, I can click on a dimension if I want, click. I can grab the little grip down here that's on the def points layer, click. I can move it over. What's nice about it is that the shape of the dimension maintains itself, right? And the dimension changes. So because that length actually changed, the dimension changes here as well. So I click on that, I drag this back over here, click, and it readjusts itself. Okay, so there's a couple of dimensions. Let's look at, dimensions are really easy, right? They're just really easy to use. Angular, right? Click once, click a second time, click a third time. There's my 90-degree angle, right? We've got our, oh, we don't have any circles. Oh, we do have a circle in here. Radius. There we go. 3 feet. Click, click. And let's see if we can get we might not be able to get a diameter out of this. Oh, we did. Diameter 6 foot, right? So click, click. So I use the arc on my door to generate those. But if you had a circle, you could use this dimension to dimension your circle, okay? All right, so we've got our dimensions. You can really use any dimension type to generate these. We have a couple of options to help us quickly generate dimensions. So if I'm creating dimensions, I have to hit enter between my dimensions to generate more, right? So I create one, enter, create another, hit enter, create another, hit enter, create another. I have a continue option right here, okay? If I click on continue, it's going to go to the last dimension that was generated here. Well, I guess those don't continue, so they don't get the last connection. But I could continue this one on, so I can continue the dimension. It goes to the last one that was generated and says, hey, would you like to continue your dimension? In this case, I don't want to continue the angle, so I'm going to hit enter. And it says, okay, pick the one you want to continue. So I'm going to come down here to this last one, click, and it continues that last one. So I can click, and it just continues to continue. Click, click, click. Right? I can grab all these things. Click, 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 escape. Yep.
Because I need to look at the assignment.
Yeah.
We're dimensioning for the first string or chord or whatever center of windows.
Mhm.
Second string would be what?
The intersecting walls and changes in plane on the building.
Third overall.
Overall, yep. Nope, you're good. And again, I say this, and whenever it's funny because I actually love drafting. I really like drafting. I think it's kind of soothing a little bit. But early in my career, you know, you would kind of get the crappy tasks, and a crappy task would be like doing a dimension floor plan, right? So like, hey, can you do a dimension floor plan? And nobody wanted to do the dimension floor plans because everybody likes them different. You do them one way, and people are quite particular. So I say that because that's exactly it. Do you want the top to the center stud to the bottom? And we'll say, oh no, we always like it center line. And somebody else will say, we never like it center line. Or do you want it to the center of the opening? Yes, in case it moves, then we can just center the opening. No, we want the rough opening. We always use the rough opening. You know, so we have a good general standard, but nobody ever adheres to it. Okay, so we can continue our dimensions, right? I can also, if I want to create a dimension, you saw me clicking, right? So I can click on linear, and I can select, you know, click, click, click. I can select things to dimension, of course. If I were to click on linear and hit enter, it will say select an object to dimension. So if I wanted to select an entire object, click, click, right? So what's nice about selecting an object instead of defining endpoints is that when you select an object, you actually get the entire object. So, and it doesn't happen that often, but just in case you accidentally miss a point on something, right? I guess this is the selection for dimensions is trying to, you know, to not have that happen, right? So you can choose select as well to dimensions and things. I don't tend to use it a whole lot because I don't think when you're dimensioning these different little pieces of objects, it's very helpful, right? But when you're dimensioning like a site plan where you have long lengths of line, it is actually very helpful. So linear, I can hit enter, click. I again can come over here and align it, click, right? I can come up here to continue, and it remembers the last string that I created. So I can click, click, escape, and there we go. Okay. So what happens when you want to create a second string of dimensions above that? If you want to baseline dimension these, right? You want to have a distance between them. You can click on your dimension, click, let's just pick and space some weird dimension here, click, drag it up above and click again. So I can drag my dimensions up over the primary dimension there. Okay, linear, click, 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 okay. I can also click on baseline. Baseline remembers the last dimension string you created, and it creates a dimension above that. Click. Right? So it is continually remembering the very last string of dimensions I generated. Now, the way this is generally going to be used is by clicking on baseline. Oh, it's asking me now where I want a baseline dimension. We'll do over here. Click. Oh, there we go. Creating a dimension, hitting escape. So I get that kind of measured distance from that first one, and then choosing continue. Right, so I could come here, click on that, mouse down a little bit, click on that, and then continue to the end, click on that. Okay, so you'll use these things in combination, right? You'll create a dimension, then you'll use continue to continue them across the wall, then you'll hit escape, then you'll click on baseline, so you create one baseline, escape, and then use continue to continue the dimensions across the object, essentially. All right, now I want to talk a little bit about the dimension style again, and I want to do that because I want to show you how to edit a dimension style, okay? So if I wanted to edit the way this looked, because I don't think these lines extend out enough or whatever, right? I can click on this little fly out here, and I can choose new dimension style, and I can choose modify. And in here, anything that I change, so for example, Oop, let me make that a little bigger. There we go. If I want my, let's see, this is our dimension line, extend beyond the tick. So this is my, oh, that's not that, extension, nope, dimension line, yes. I'm going to click up and you see how I start getting my extension out, right? There we go. So I changed that, looks pretty good. If I go to text and I want a different text there, I could click on style again, and I could click on new, dim style 2, and we could give it a different text like career. Apply. We can set current, close, and I can change my dim text style to number 2, and you notice the text changes, right? So I can hit OK, close, and my text is different. All right, so what we just did there was a type change, meaning anything with that dimension style type name would be changed. So I've got 2,000 dimensions in my drawing. I changed the type of my dimension, right, by changing the text in there, and everything changes on all 2,000 of those dimensions or whatever. All right, any questions on dimension style? Again, I think the two biggest mistakes, number one, using the standard dimension style, right? And you'll know it's the standard dimension style because it's in decimals. And you also know it's the standard dimension style because you get little arrows at the ends here instead of the architectural tick, okay? So that's completely wrong, right? This one may look tiny when you apply it for the first time, so 1:1. So you might immediately think, oh great, that's not right. I chose the standard dimension style, but I know it's not because I'm reading a feet and inches dimension. And when I go to the end here, I also see that I have this language going on here, okay? So if this is happening, but you have the correct dimension style, it's going to be that you haven't set your annotation scale appropriately, okay? Now, of course, we're going to go to our model space down here, and you're going to see now that, oh boy, maybe a 1/4 of an inch is equal to a foot was maybe not the best. Well, we might be able to fit all of our dimensions on there, right? But now you're going to have to start really thinking about, let's make this, let's do a weird scale there, 3/16. Oh, I need to add, my dimensions disappeared because I need to add 3/16 dimension style. There we go. Okay, there they are back again. So now you're really going to have to start thinking about the scale that you're generating these at, and you also have to leave a little bit of space around the edge, right, so that you have the appropriate amount of space to add dimensions to your drawings, okay? I'm going to double click in my model here, and I'm going to press F7. F7 turns that grid off. Click, click out. Just one of those pesky little settings that some people like to change. All right, so that is our first type of dimension style. Does anybody have any questions on any of that? Your assignment will be to dimension the office space, right? So let me grab our PDF here. So any dimension that you see on here, you're going to need to add, right? These can be aligned or linear dimensions, and this is going to be an aligned dimension. This is going to be an angular dimension here, okay? One thing that Jeff does do that I don't do, and I have never really seen anybody do professionally, he breaks his extension lines, like, so he leaves a little gap right there. You see that? I wouldn't worry about doing that. I don't really feel like it's necessary. And I would, and actually, funny enough, I might do it, except when you move your dimension lines around, that goes away and you have to redo it, and you move your dimension lines around a lot, so I don't think time-wise it makes sense to do it. So don't worry about adding a break in your dimension lines here. Okay. Next type of dimension style we're going to talk about. If you guys don't mind me taking a 5-minute break to get a cup of coffee. I'll be right back. It's a rough night tonight, huh? I'll be quick. dimensions aren't really too bad, right? These are dimensions for a piece of architecture, right? Like a building. But there are also going to be dimensions for things like site plans that we're going to have to worry about. And so let's talk about creating dimensions for a site plan. And I want to pull one up here. Not there. Okay. Where's our lovely site plan? Well, maybe I can pull it up through CAD Common. Let's see. 1310. Okay. So let's talk about generating a dimension style for a site plan. And I'm just going to cheat a tiny bit. I'm going to Control C and copy that. So what I'm about to do here is called a copy clip. And this is how you can copy drawings from one drawing to another, right? So if I select all these objects, Control C copy, and it has to be a Control C, not just using the actual copy command, okay? I'm going to go back over to this drawing here that I was in and happy with, and I'm going to Control V, paste, click. All right. So just that easy, right? Okay. And I want to create some dimensions for this site plan now. Before I do that, let me just take, I'm going to take attendance here real quick. Sorry guys, let's see. Okay. All right, Andrew is not here. Dallin. Dallin's no. Landy, yes. Gabriel, yes. Cade, yes. Dadby, no. Robert, yes. Where is Justin at? Marty, Brian, Thomas, Zach, yep. Deb, Charles. Stuart is not. Okay. Okay, so let's generate the dimensions for the site plan. Dimensions for site plans in AutoCAD require a little bit of, we'll call it customization, or finagling, right? So we do have to generate a different type of dimension style for it with a few different types of settings, okay? So this is going to be the dimension style for any architectural type application. Now the next one that I'm going to generate is going to be for a site plan, all right? And I want to remind you, so I was trying to find my site plan drawing here. I want to remind you what site plan dimensions look like. Not that you guys don't remember, I guess, right? It's burned into your brains now. But essentially this is what they look like. So you have the bearing, which is a northwest bearing here, and then we have an actual dimension here, 185.18, okay? Now I want to remind you that when you draw a site plan, you draw it in architectural, or you draw it in decimal units and you scale it up to architectural units, right? The end point is for an architectural application to scale it up, okay? So what that means is that you're taking those decimal inches and you're scaling them up by a factor of 12, essentially converting them into feet and inches, all right? So I want to remind you of that. And then I'm going to talk about how to create our dimension style here, okay? So our dimension style is going to look like this. This is what a dimension on a site plan looks like. So the first thing you're going to notice is that we don't have any extension lines, right? And we don't have a dimension line or a baseline. Oh, I'm all over the place here. Where is that? There we go. Right? We just have essentially kind of a string of text. And so I'm going to show you how to do that and then how to make it so that your dimension can read the fact that you've scaled your site plan up by a factor of 12. Okay? All right. So I have to create a new dimension style, and it's going to be for your site plan. So I'm going to click on my little flyout here. And I'm going to actually make a copy of this new dimension style. So I'm going to take this one, make a copy, and edit it how I need it to be. So I'm going to click on New, And we'll call this site dim style. And I want to start with new dimension style. So all of the settings from new dimension style will appear, right, when I make this new dimension style, and I can edit it from there. So I'm going to click continue. And I'm just going to start from the beginning again, and I'm going to show you the few main differences between a site dimension style and a regular dimension style. And the first thing is we don't have any extension or dimension lines here. So I have to check those off. I have to suppress them. Dim 1, dim 2, check, check. Extension line 1, extension line 2, and they're all gone. I know, right? Okay, so that's what our dimensions look like. Okay, we're not really worried about any of these because they're not showing anymore. Okay, our text, we get to pick whatever text we want, and it will scale according to, you know, the scale of your drawing. But we're going to leave all of this the same. Okay, we're going to go to fit now, and I want this looks good, over dimension line with leader. Okay, this all looks good as well. I'm going to go to primary units now. Now, oh, did I skip something? No, I didn't, sorry. This is where it gets a little bit tricky with site dimensions, okay? If I were to, right now, go to my site plan and measure it, okay? I'm gonna hit okay here, so I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna go to my site plan right now, and I'm gonna measure it. I'm gonna use distance to measure it. I'm gonna go to distance, and I'm just gonna measure this boundary. Okay, it says that it is 180 feet 3 3/4 inches. That doesn't seem right. I don't know if this one got scaled. No, that's right. Distance. That's right. Sorry, guys. 180 feet 3 3/4 of an inch. Okay, and it's reading in feet and inches. If I were to, I'm going to go back into my dimension style now. Dimension style, site dimension style. I'm going to choose modify. Okay. If I were to just do what I have done here, and I were to hit OK, OK, close, and I were to add a linear dimension to this object, I get, you know, the 170 foot 8 inches. Okay. But that's not what I want to have read on my site plan. I want to read it in decimal inches. And I want to read it in decimal inches so that I can input in decimal inches correctly and then scale it up by a factor of 12. Everybody looks slightly confused. That somewhat makes sense, okay? Okay, and I'm hoping, I just grabbed this from the CAD Common, and I'm actually really hoping it's the right size. Let me draw one of these segments real quick so that I can see if it's the right size. Let's do one of these. Because if it's not the right size, this isn't going to work, and it will take me a second to figure it out. So let me just do that. So at 180.31 at an angle of north 18 degrees. 50 seconds west. What did I do? At 180.31 at an angle of north 18 degrees 50 seconds west. East, oops, east. Okay, well, that's right. Okay, that's right. So this is actually that one right there. Okay. All right. So the dimension, and I'm going to scale this up by 12. Is that the right size? Yeah, it's the right size. Okay. I'll believe it now. Okay. It's the right size. Yep.
How did you scale that up to match?
So I drew it in decimal format, right? And then I SC, enter, scale. I selected the entire thing, enter. I clicked here and I typed 12, enter. So I didn't really kind of like match it. I just hoped that when it scaled, it was the same size. Yeah. Okay. So I just wanted to verify those were the same size. So this says 170 feet 8 inches, which is different than the 180.31 decimal inches. Okay. So what we need to do in order for this to read correctly is we need to change our dimension style, essentially, so that it scales architectural dimensions back down. Okay. And I'm going to do that by going to primary units, and I'm going to click on scale factor, and I'm going to choose 1/12, 1/12. Enter. Okay. And by doing that, I'm going to get a decimal in here that says 0.083333, and that's correct. I'm going to hit OK, close. God, I feel like something is just not working here. Let's do that again. Let's just make sure it's working. Okay, linear dimension, enter, click. Let's try it now. Oh, I know what I've done. Sorry guys, I know what I've done. Modify. I forgot to change this to architect or to decimal. Something is definitely wrong here. All right, so I've got my scale factor. This is this. 1/12. Yep, because when you scale your site plans up, you're scaling them up by a factor of 12. So essentially, you want your dimension to just read 1/12 of that length. That's the idea behind it. I feel like I'm very royally messing all this up today. So now I'm going to click on linear, enter, click. Oh, this is not working today. What is the problem? This is why I should have just drawn it. Well, let's look at our dimension style. Let's see what else could be wrong here.
Was it supposed to be architectural still?
Yeah, I think it should. Yeah, that shouldn't really affect it because it's not reading the units in your model space. It's just reading an object. So let's see. Let's make sure that I've got everything correct here. Not scaling. Dim looks good. Layer. Okay, that align dimension line, that looks good. Fit, that looks all good. Decimal. That looks good. That looks good. What am I missing? What am I missing? These do not need to... Let's see. Let's go back to our... I don't think I'm missing anything, though, is the problem. Maybe I just need to start a brand new dimension style. Like maybe I shouldn't have copied it. Oh, let's see. Sorry, guys. Alright, yep. Let me start, I'm going to start a brand new drawing and just, I'm going to redraw this site plan. And then I'll draw the site plan and then I'm going to dimension it. I was trying to shortcut it and use one that was already drawn, but I don't know whose it was, and I don't know where it came from, so there could be the potential that something was just inherently wrong, because I don't believe I was doing anything wrong in the dimension style. So let's do this real quick here. Maybe I'll just draw a couple of them. Let's see. Okay. All right, so here's our line command, and oh, I need to set my units to make sure this is decimal degrees, or surveyor units. There we go, that looks good. Okay, so my first line is going to be at 0, 0, and then it's going to be at 158.21, an angle of south 86 degrees, 43 minutes, 0 seconds east. Okay. quick. Okay, and at 180.31, an angle of north, 18 degrees, 50 minutes, 0 seconds east. Okay. And at 185.18, at an angle of north, 23 degrees, 27 minutes, 40 seconds west. Okay, we'll just stop there. And I'm going to take this, and I'm going to scale it up by a factor of 12, enter, and then I'm going to change over here to architectural, so everything looks pretty good. I'm going to look at this. Okay, that all seems right. I'm going to create a new dimension style. This is going to be the site plan style. So I'm going to click on new, and this will be dims, or site dim style. And it's going to be annotative, continue, and these will be, oops, lines. We'll make these all by layer, by layer, by layer, and we want to suppress these 2 dimension lines. It's a good review anyway, right? By layer, by layer, by layer. We'll suppress those 2. We'll go to symbols and arrows. We don't need to worry about any of that. Text. I'll just create a new text style. Well, we can just leave the standard as Arial, which seems pretty good to me, so we'll just use standard. These are going to be by layer. Won't worry about that. Text height, that's good. Vertically above. Centered. Looks good. Aligned with dimension line. Okay. And then we're going to go to fit. That looks, these are all good for now. Primary units will have decimal. That looks good. Precision is good. Round off. And we'll do 1/12. And that should, right? I find myself saying should a lot in AutoCAD. Set current, close. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the aligned dimension, enter, click to select, enter, and I should have some text somewhere, but I don't have my dimension, my annotative scale set, so I'm going to do that real quick. Okay, nothing's going right today, is it? Let's see, aligned. There we go. There we go. Okay. So let me do that again. So I have my object here. This, I mean, I say this, ideally it should have worked over here, right? Because I just took this site plan that I'd measured, right? I LI list, and I can measure it and see that the length is 183 3/4. And I look now at this new drawing that I just did the same thing to, LI enter, 183 and, well, it's 23 30-seconds, but very, very close dimensions. So that means that the site plan was drawn correctly in the other one, so there must have just been something in the dimension style that I had copied that wasn't working very nicely with the other one. So I drew this whole thing again. I created a brand new dimension style, okay? I'm going to edit my dimension style just to look at it one more time, modify. The main differences between a regular dimension style and the site dimension are going to be suppressing these lines, right? That's number 1. And then the second thing is going to be make sure we're in decimal units, and then make sure that we apply a scale factor of 1/12. Okay, so once I do that, I can set current, which means that the site dimension style is chosen up here. I can click on whatever dimension type I want to use, right? If I had chosen linear, let me just show you what would have happened. I would have gotten a straight dimension, which is not what I wanted there, right? I'm going to hit undo. I want to use an aligned dimension, okay? So that will read the entire length of this line instead of from here to there. So I chose my aligned dimension. I'm going to hit enter to select the object instead of choosing endpoints. Click, enter. Oh, I killed it. I killed it. I'm going to click, sorry, click, not enter. And my dimension displays. So if I look at this, 180.31, 180.3100, that's a precision. So I'm just showing an extra precision in my dimension style. Modify, see I could change that to 2. There we go. 180.31, great, okay. So the tough part, which is actually showing the length of this object in decimal inches, has been done, 180.31, and that's accurate. So if I change it, then that dimension will change with it, okay? Now the next question is, but wait a minute, this site plan, we can't get to the point of actually drawing the site plan without bearings, right? So I need to know this is north, 18 degrees, 15 minutes, 00 seconds east, all right? And there's really no way in AutoCAD to achieve that dimension without adding some text to your actual dimension here, right? So we kind of have to cheat it a little bit. This is my favorite part about AutoCAD, right? The cheating that can happen. In Revit, those of you just guys taking Revit, I think. In Revit, there's no cheating, right? So you can't get around things. But in AutoCAD, there's a lot of cheating. So what I need to do here now is, one thing I want to point out is that this dimension string, it's a piece of text essentially, right? It's a dimension style that is reading a dimension and it is showing it to you using text, right? And if I move or alter it, then it shows, you know, the text, it shows a different dimension. If I double click on this piece of text right here twice very quickly, click, click, it becomes editable. Right? So this is where the nice cheating part comes in AutoCAD. If you need to, you know, just cheat a dimension a little bit to make it work for somebody, then you can just type it in, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my keys on my keyboard. You see that my cursor there, how it's at the front of it. I'm going to go to the end of it. Okay, I guess it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to type in the bearing now. I'm going to type north 18, and there's a symbol up here for degree. What is that? %D is the keyboard shortcut. So 18 degrees, 50 seconds, 00 west. And I'm going to choose close, and now that's displayed properly. Now if I needed to edit it again, I would double click on it, click, click. And I could, for example, hit enter and put that beneath there and hit close text editor, right? So I could do that, yep. Oh, it is east. Yep, you're right. It is east. Yep. Click, click. East. I could click on it one time and I get a grip, and I could click on that grip and I could move it around, right? So if that text needs to go somewhere else, it can go somewhere else. But that is how you're going to create a site dimension style. And I think maybe a good lesson, I tried to cheat the system a little bit, right? And there's some type of setting, let me modify this one more time, see if I can find it. There's some type of setting that I copied from new dimension style that the site plan is not liking. So I think it's better just to maybe create a brand new one. Yeah, there's just something, decimal, precision, but yeah, I don't know what this is. It's weird. So create a brand new style when you're, when you're creating site dimensions, essentially. Okay. Again, these are the size of these are controlled by the annotative scale of your drawing. So if I change that to 1/8, right, it flexes. And again, all of these are dependent upon what you're going to print that drawing at, right? So if the print scale is a 1/16 inch is equal to a foot, I'm going to choose a 1/16 there, and that size is appropriate for a 1/16 inch drawing, okay? Okay. Any questions on site dimensions? Yep.
How did you do the degree symbol?
So when I when I double clicked on it, I came up here to symbol, and there's the degree right there. But if you wanted to keyboard shortcut it, you could type %D, and it would magically pop up there. Yep. Any other questions? Okay. That's probably good for today. I was thinking of doing some leaders, but I think we'll save that gem for Wednesday. I think I'm going to post a new schedule too. So I'll post a new schedule just to show you the rest of our few weeks left, what we're going to be doing every day. So that will be updated. And then your assignment will be to, there we go. I'm going to add into your already existing the office layout, wherever it's at, right here. So we have 2 assignments here, but I'm just going to get rid of this one, and I'm going to add dimensions to this layout one, right? So this one will be called office layout, but I'll add in there is another requirement to add dimensions to it. And it really, all I want you to do is I want you to copy the dimensions that are shown in the book, right? Which look like, let's see, where are they? It's coming up close, I can feel it right here. Okay, so I really just want you to copy all of these dimensions and make them look correct. This is 3/16 of an inch, so you'll scale your drawing appropriately, and then the annotation scale of your model space will be 3/16 to accommodate your dimensions. So, any other questions on dimensions? Not too bad. Okay, I release you.